I am Jennifer Roberts, and I am currently a consultant in the climate change space, doing a lot of work locally. And I want to welcome you to the Path to Positive North Carolina Climate Ambassador Training. This is the first day of a 2-day training. Real quick, you've all been on Zoom for like, what, a year and a half now? So just want to remind folks to keep your lines muted so we don't hear your wonderful dogs in the background. We are recording this. So if you have to leave early, if you come in late, we will have the full recording available and we'll send that out after day 2. The chat function is open. We also are going to have question and answer after the 90-minute training. So at 5:30, for those who can stay on, we will open it up to questions and answers and any kind of sharing that you might want to have. We also will have a short, like 2-minute break in the middle so you can get a glass of water or something. But we won't have time for breakout rooms today. So here are the folks with us today. I've already introduced myself. I was a Charlotte mayor and a Mecklenburg County commissioner doing work on climate change now. We also have with us June Blotnick, who is the executive director of Clean Air North Carolina, has been doing work on clean air and climate change and helping our communities for many, many years now. We have Ebony Lockett, who is the CEO of Harvesting Humanity. They are a nonprofit focused on community work and empowerment, and she is a career educator. And finally, we have Ethan Blumenthal, who is a lawyer and also the founder and CEO of Good Solar, a organization working with communities and nonprofits to bring solar energy to them and help them figure out financing. So we've got a lot of great experts with us, and I really appreciate their time today. This is a collaboration between all the organizations that you see the logos of, but that includes EcoAmerica, and they are a national nonprofit based in DC that works with communities around the country in the areas of faith, health, and local communities. And they are working to build public support for climate solutions. So they have a lot of great resources on messaging around climate change and advocacy. And we will be sure and give you all those links later. I'm gonna let June say a few words about Clean Air North Carolina.
Thanks, Jennifer, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people here with us today. Some of you may know about Clean Air NC. We used to be called Clean Air Carolina for many years and just rebranded this year. We are a statewide advocacy organization working, our mission statement's right there, for the health of all North Carolinians by pursuing equitable and collaborative solutions that address climate change and air pollution. And we really work on issues at the intersection of health, air pollution, climate, and environmental justice. So you can see several of our programs there, and we also sponsor a conference every year in April, and the theme is health, equity, and the climate crisis. So you'll be getting more information about that as the spring approaches. But thanks again for being here. Appreciate it.
So why are we all here? I wanted to show just a couple of slides about how the climate crisis impacts us in North Carolina. If you can see on the left, North Carolina is one of the top 2 states for billion-dollar weather disasters. That means that we get more disasters that cost us more than $1 billion to recover from. And those are constant dollars that are adjusted for inflation. So local leadership in North Carolina matters a great deal. We also know that in 2020, ballot measures around the country voted for and approved $3.7 billion for land conservation and climate resiliency. So voters matter. Citizen input matters. Local leadership matters. The chart on the right, just as again, a look at the entire United States, and you can see how the cost of climate disasters continues to increase. So all those little dots are the numbers, and then you can see the total cost. But North Carolina is very important. We know that the public supports climate solutions and is concerned. So what's interesting in this survey by Yale Climate Communications is that the majority of people want to charge for carbon. They want to regulate carbon. They support tax rebates for energy efficient vehicles and solar panels, and they want fossil fuel companies to pay that tax. So these are things that are supported by the public. The challenge is we don't feel enough urgency. And these two slides indicate there's this human thing we have where we feel like we're more resilient and that we can stand a lot of challenges, but we need to act now. If you can see 71%, and this is from North Carolina, Yale Climate Communications has state by state survey data. So 70% of us think that, yeah, climate change is going to hurt our children, but 43% of us think that it's not hurting us now. We know that's not true. We know that we have seen many climate disasters already, and they're just multiplying. So that's another reason why we want to help you speak up and advocate about climate solutions. So again, only 54% of people in North Carolina think that local government and local officials have a role in helping mitigate and stop global warming. So we're going to help you educate all of them that there's a lot we can do at the local level. And you can also see, unfortunately, there is a difference between rural and urban support. So our urban areas are more supportive of climate solutions and think our local government should step up and do something. So leadership makes a difference. The urgency is real. We will continue to be impacted by climate change. We have to help our elected officials connect the dots between poverty, climate change, health, all the things you're going to learn about today. And we can be role models. We have resources we're going to talk to you about, and we're going to show you some examples of best practices and solutions that are available now. So we're going to help you make that connection between climate, our health, our future, our pocketbooks. We're going to give you some of the skills, knowledge, and we'll give you this slide deck afterwards. You are free to use any of these slides if you're giving talks to your book club or your church or synagogue. And we're also going to empower you to help advocate so that more people understand positive solutions that we can all be part of. So this is a quick overview of our agenda. Today, we're doing an overview of climate change and the impacts on North Carolina. If you're not in North Carolina, because we have people who sign up from other places, it still will be relevant for wherever you are. We'll talk about solutions. And then tomorrow, we'll focus on how to communicate this, whether you're writing a letter to the editor or you're talking to your family at Thanksgiving, and how to advocate, which public officials do what, and how to advocate effectively with them. This is a slide from NASA, and we'll give you the link for that. You're free to use this in any presentation that you make, but it just shows graphically how the climate is warming and how it is impacting actually the areas closer to our polar regions are getting even hotter because the difference is greater. We know the last 5 years, the hottest 5 years on record, and it continues to impact all of us. Heat can be very dangerous. So anyway, that's just a quick overview of what you can see on the NASA website. We also put this slide in here again. If you're on this training, you probably know all this, but sometimes it helps just to give people a graphic picture of what's happening, what the greenhouse effect really is, how the carbon in the atmosphere is trapping some of the sun's energy and warming. The oceans are also absorbing quite a bit of that heat that's getting through and not being reflected because our polar ice caps are melting. And again, this might be something that you want to show people, especially if you're working with educating children. They want to see, here's the science behind it. And we know that the carbon in the atmosphere is tracking with temperature change. And so if you look over hundreds of thousands of years, this slide is really indicative that every time carbon dioxide goes up, it acts as a greenhouse gas along with other gases like methane and traps the temperature, traps the heat rays, warming our mean temperature around the globe. We've never been this high if you look at the projection of where carbon is going in the atmosphere. And we're reaching new territory in how it's impacting our climate and our communities. These are the factors that contribute. In North Carolina, this is the most recent slide from the Department of Environmental Quality. Electricity and transportation are each about a third of where we have our greenhouse gases coming from. So you can see here, homes also are part of that, commercial and waste. But if you want to have the most impact the most quickly, it's electrifying, or it's moving away from coal and gas in our electric sector, and also electrifying our transportation sector. There are still some people who don't believe the science, but what we're going to tell you today is you're not going to win the argument on science if you have people in your family or your company who don't believe the science. We know that there's a consensus. This is actually an incredible consensus around the globe of scientists who know that humans are causing global warming. We know that the Department of Defense calls it a threat multiplier and has climate impacts, that they are preparing for and working with. There are mayors around the country that have called out the crisis. There's business is supporting more and more investment in clean energy. We know about Pope Francis's Laudato Si, which talked about the importance of creation care. So all of these groups and all of these organizations are supporting action on climate change. So how do we see this in North Carolina? Climate change is impacting every level of our governance, actual governance systems, things like how our courts work and our tax base, et cetera, to the people, to our infrastructure, and then to plants and animals, the natural resources we see around us. This is actually a picture of one of the Environment Committee meetings when we were discussing the Strategic Energy Action Plan. But climate disasters and impacts affect every aspect of our governance. And that is, jobs and tax revenues, our built environment, even the ability of our governments to function in disasters is impacted. We know all these things are part of our climate impacts. We also know that human health is a big motivator for people to take action. And health is not just physical and mental health, but there's also that sense of community health. Which parts of our communities are impacted more? This picture is an apartment in New Bern after Hurricane Faye. Oh, sorry, it's in Doral, it's in Charlotte. After a hurricane, and these are the kinds of this is the kind of damage that people can't recover from if they don't have resources. And we know that impacts that mold that comes from water damage can greatly impact the health of our community. These are things that we know people can see and feel. And I'm going to turn it over now to June, because her organization does a lot of work with health impacts on our air quality and climate change. So June.
Thanks, Jennifer. So as we begin to talk about the various health impacts, this first slide is just is a summary of the type of climate impacts related to health. And so for North Carolina, we know that extreme heat, extreme weather, and vector-borne diseases, insect-related diseases, are the top 3 health impacts. And so we also have, as we know, with hurricanes, water-related illnesses, food and safety concerns during hurricanes and other extreme weather events. I mean, we get blackouts, and the electricity goes out even with just a minor storm these days. But these are just some of the health impacts, and we'll go in those a little more in a few minutes. But I did want to mention, just in September, the public health officials around the world published an op-ed in all kinds of medical journals in different countries, saying that climate change really is the greatest threat to public health. And that's the first time this has happened. So the clinicians and health community around the world are trying to, raise awareness that this is very serious, and we all need to get involved. Next. So heat-related deaths is, it's a very serious thing, especially here in North Carolina with our extreme heat. This information is from the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report just last year, and it shows that 702 average deaths per year that we're seeing, and 27 different ways that heat can kill you. And that's where we're seeing heat stroke, heart attack, kidney failure, dehydration, all kinds of different ways that heat can kill. And then it shows a total number of how many deaths over the last 2 decades that were related. And of course, older people and children are also need to be concerned about staying hydrated and away from the heat. And then we have rural North Carolinians, of course, our agricultural workers, people living in mobile homes, people that live near the poverty line, outdoor sports teams. A lot of schools start football practice in August. And then people obviously with little or no air conditioning, we're very concerned about. Next. So that leads us into the heat island, and many of you may have heard of this before, but the urban heat island effect is that in cities and in certain neighborhoods within cities, you've got a lot of cement, a lot of black roofs, and other kinds of surfaces that just attract the heat and just create sort of a microclimate even in cities and even within neighborhoods, as I mentioned. And so we really need to focus on resiliency planning. And I'll be talking a little bit about that later, but just increase the tree canopy, add green roofs, even white roofs. We'll share more about how to counteract that heat island effect later. Next. So fossil fuels, air quality and health. Well, we know, and our organization was started because of the contribution from coal burning plants in the Charlotte region that contributed to ground level ozone pollution. And so we know that fossil fuels don't just emit carbon, which is behind the climate crisis, but also different kinds of pollution, including mercury and other hazardous air pollutants. But when we talk about air pollution, it really is a lifelong risk, starting even with women who are pregnant. And lots of research has been done that because air pollution causes inflammation in the body, women who are pregnant may give birth earlier. Preterm birth and then low birth weight issues are a big problem. We know that children's lungs are still developing. They are more impacted by air pollution. Adults, we still have plenty of adults with asthma, and then the chronic diseases like heart disease, COPD, diabetes are impacted by air pollution. And then the elderly, as their lungs deteriorate and they have less lung capacity, it can complicate their health in many ways. So I think for most people in North Carolina, they don't see the air pollution and they don't think it's impacting their health, but the research proves otherwise. Jennifer. And then this is another issue that all of us are concerned about, and that's the disproportionate health impacts on communities of color. And these are just sort of staggering facts when you learn this, and it certainly was when I learned about this issue. This slide has to do with asthma. So for Hispanic children, 2 times as likely to die from asthma as non-Hispanic whites. Black children is 4 times as likely to die from asthma as white children. And then it goes into the adults. And African-American women have the highest rate of asthma, and more have died from that than any other group. So, you know, these are the kind of statistics you're like, wait a minute, why is that happening? What's going on here? It is an epidemic. Duke University, other institutions in North Carolina have been studying health disparities, but climate change is actually going to make it worse. Next. These are the 2 air pollutants in North Carolina that we follow. There's lots of things that pollute the air, but just as a very brief summary here, ground level ozone does not come out of smokestacks. It doesn't come out of cars, but the emissions from cars, the nitrogen oxide and the volatile organic compounds that do come from smokestacks and tailpipes, they interact with heat and sunlight, and that's why ground level ozone is mostly a summertime problem. The issue here is that the ozone season is stretching out. It's getting longer. It doesn't stop in September. It goes all the way through October and starts in March. The other air pollutant we're very concerned about is particle pollution, PM 2.5 we call it, and it's so tiny you can't see it. And so Clean Air NC has a network of portable particle pollution monitors all across the state. So people, especially in environmental justice communities, can see what they're breathing. So those are the 2 pollutants we need to know about and know that climate change will make them worse. We talked about the impact of extreme weather. The US could see up to a 400% increase in extreme downpours, and I think we've all witnessed that in North Carolina and watched the news in other parts of the country where it's happening. So the storms are getting more intense, flooding. We saw that picture earlier about toxic mold, and Hurricane Katrina, which obviously a major storm, heavy mold growth in 70,000 water damaged homes. And that, you know, that mold does impact infants and children and their growing sensitive lungs. I know that I visited Robeson County a few years ago, and it was probably a year or 2 after Hurricane Florence, and there were still homes that weren't repaired and they were empty. And so, you know, they didn't get hit with the hurricane as much as the flooding. So flooding can really wreak havoc in neighborhoods and on health. Next. Vectorborne diseases. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation, probably 15 years ago, did a report called Ticked Off. And it was a clever way to call attention to the fact that climate change was affecting the insect world and the diseases that they were going to bring. So as we know, as we have warmer days, the seasons stretch out, these insects are coming from the south where the temperatures have always been hot, and they're coming into the southeast United States. So this is a real concern. And the last note there is disease cases from mosquito, tick, and flea bites more than tripled from 2004 to 2016. So that's very worrisome. And I think I'm going to turn it back over to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, June. And that blow up picture of mosquito is always terrifying to me. Good Halloween picture.
Yeah, I always have to do that one, Jennifer.
Well, we also hear a lot about food when we talk about climate change. And, you know, people realize that there are things like droughts impacting our breadbasket in the Western United States. But it's also impacting farmers in North Carolina. The seasons are changing, growing gets more difficult, topsoil gets washed away during floods. But the other thing that's interesting is it actually decreases our yields. So wheat yields have gone down 21%. And the protein nutritional value is actually decreasing in our crops. Corn yields are going down, and there's a decrease in essential minerals in our crops as well. So we'll see not only famine, but also the quality of our food is being impacted by climate change. Obviously, as our oceans continue to warm, the oceans become less hospitable to certain types of fish, and we already have, you know, people seeing lobsters in different parts and overfishing in some areas. Marine life is threatened, and that is a critical source of food for many countries around the world, but it's also, you know, a big part of our industry in North Carolina. And we have, you know, marine biologists who are studying how do we repair the reefs? How do we try to slow the loss of marine life? Many of our universities in North Carolina are looking at these challenges. And so that is, you know, one more health concern. There's also the impact on social cohesion as communities are disrupted. This picture from the Atlantic is a family that has learned that their friends have been crushed in a hurricane in their home. And it's you know, the trauma stays with people. That hurts communities. The disruption as people have to flee their homes and can't go back. That sense that social cohesion is lost. There's also a picture there from Hugo, which was in 1989. So, you know, Charlotte, I know there are people on this call from all over North Carolina, but people in Charlotte sometimes think, oh, well, you know, we don't get the severe weather. Well, yes, we do. And it could happen any of these hurricane seasons as these storms get more fierce and more frequent. It impacts all of us. And, you know, the mental health, this is amazing. 48% of Americans, half of Americans believe climate change already is impacting our mental health. And if you have children who are old enough to have read about climate change or have studied something in science, if you ask them if they're worried about it, you will hear it is absolutely impacting. You know, we've had COVID that has increased our amount of depression, but all the media articles and the awareness that's growing about climate change is impacting our community mental health, the amount of depression, unfortunately suicides, and what we're seeing in even if you think about our public safety professionals who have to rescue people from houses that have been flooded and have to find the bodies when there have been disasters. So we recognize this is absolutely part of the cost of climate change. The picture on the left is in Wilmington, and that is the firefighters who are praying because they found dead bodies in a house that was crushed. On the right, you see the operations center in North Carolina, and you know, North Carolina has been hit. You know, Florence and Michael and Dorian. It's like every year, every other year, the frequency is definitely increasing, and this takes a toll. I'm going to turn it over to Ebony now because we mentioned vulnerable populations, and she's going to talk a little bit about climate justice.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I just want to stick with that thread for a moment about trauma, because that is where those stories live, in that traumatic moment of having to, survive some, if you're lucky enough, a disaster. And we know it's something we can do to halt this process. It's something we can do to stop this trauma. I want to dig a little deeper into those vulnerable populations and disasters. What do they look like? What are their stories? We know that they experience greater health risk. We know that those children that we heard about from June, and those elderly, and those in the rural and low income communities, they are more vulnerable than ever to those disaster impacts. And so we think about children whose vulnerable lungs are just, developing, and they're breathing more air, they're closer to the ground. So they're going to be, really impacted by the heat of the pavement, the air quality, the air conditions. What are we doing intentionally to make sure that the vulnerable populations and disasters are being cared for? And when we think about those vulnerable populations, let's name them again, because it's really intersectional when you think about who the low income communities are. There are typically Black or African American communities. There are typically Latinx communities, largely made up of people who are already marginalized in other ways. They're closer to the coal plants. And we'll talk about this fact a lot more tomorrow, but 60% of our vulnerable populations live within 30 miles of a coal-fired plant. So imagine what the trauma that you live with on a day-to-day basis. Climate change exacerbates those existing inequities that we know already exist. And while climate change impacts all of us, the low-income communities and the communities of color and the children and the elderly and the rural, let us not forget the rural, those individuals who are kind of isolated from the support systems and the mechanisms that could support them. Those with limited language proficiency, those are among some of the most vulnerable. Next slide, Jennifer. And when we think about housing and health disparities, June alluded to this, Jennifer alluded to this, and I'm sure you'll hear this as a repetitive theme. There is intentionality in who's most impacted, and that depends on where you live. That depends on, again, who you are. This is an example of the flood, the Florence hurricane in 2018, and how many people got flooded. And let's look at some of those statistics of how people fared in that situation. Low-income neighborhoods, again, are more prone to be in low-lying areas, so they're going to flood more easily. 20% of the residents live below the poverty line in this area of flooding. 19% were disabled. 700,000 of those residents were people enrolled in Medicaid. And there's certain criteria for you to be able to even be enrolled in Medicaid. So think about who we're talking about, who humanize those stories that we're telling you. 139 public K through 12 schools are still closed at the time of this reporting in 2018 due to the hurricane. We have to make sure that we are taking care of our most vulnerable populations. Next slide. And when we think about how we got here, why is there such a high population of certain individuals in certain neighborhoods? And what does this all mean when we talk about climate change? Well, we have to go back to decades of racist housing policies. And I'm sure a lot of people have been talking about redlining because it's a hot topic now that we've recognize that we're 50th out of 50 in economic mobility. And if you're born poor in this city or in this state, it's very unlikely that you'll be able to come out unless we do some intentional planning and we do some intentional things. That history lives in the spaces that we created. So when we think about there's an intentionality that certain populations live in certain parts of town that have heavy pavement, very little tree canopy, all of these heat trapping elements, we have to think about who's being trapped. And we have to think about, when we think about redlining, who's benefiting, because there is green lining when you think about redlining. And I'll talk a lot more about that tomorrow sessions. I know we're limited on time today, but I definitely want to, just bring up that point. It's intentional placement of people, it's intentional placement of coal and plants such that are going to be pollutants to the community, pollutants to the soil, and of course, pollutants to the people. Next slide, Jennifer. And then let's exacerbate all of those, that allostatic load as if it wasn't heavy enough. We have COVID-19 that hit, and there is no surprise that areas that were already dealing with climate change, already dealing with some of the environmental injustice issues we're going to talk about, already have higher levels of high particulate matter that June discussed and really kind of got us to understand what that looks like. Many low income and minority communities, those are the communities that were hit hardest. They had disproportionate amount of COVID deaths. And so when we think about that correlation, it's not hard for us to understand why this is such an important cause to be rallying behind. We also think about the heavy utility burden that most people carry. Again, the same populations that have already these intense vulnerabilities, further more vulnerable. Luckily, our government did say, you know, we're gonna make some moratoriums. We're gonna make sure that people did not have their lights cut off. We're gonna make sure that people are able to sustain. But those moratoriums had ended. Duke was gracious enough to extend theirs to March. And so, you know, we have to think about what is the long-term plan though? How are we gonna make sure that our most vulnerable populations are properly cared for? Next slide. And then we really want to think about the other side of the coin, because a lot of times we think about one side of the coin and don't flip that coin over. As we replace the coal-fired plants, as we replace the fossil fuel industries, we're moving into new and cleaner energy, which is a great thing. Our people and our planet and our non-living humans, we need that. So that is absolutely to be applauded. But you have to think about the people who are being displaced once again, and those are the workers who are coming from those industries, and they are, you know, they're fighting hard, and now it's almost like they're pit against the environmentalists because they're saying, we understand that, you know, these are not necessarily good for the environment, for the people, but what's going to happen to our jobs, our income, our livelihood, our lives, our heirs? How are we going to feed our families? How are we going to sustain our lives? So when we think about this transition, we also must think about a just and equitable transition. What kind of pathways and pipelines are we putting in place so that displaced workers can have living wages, can have livelihoods, can pass on things to their heir in this new clean economy? How are we preparing them for the new kind of work? And that's really what the left picture is telling us about, is really talking about, you know, the fact that the unions and the environmentalists, we need each other. We need each other in these movements. And we depend on one another. On the right, you'll see a picture of June's house where she is having solar installed. And she has solar installed in her home. And I take very, you know, I don't take it lightly that there's a Black male going up on that roof installing that solar. Because again, when we think about justice and equity, you have to go back to that statistic we talked about earlier. 60% of those who are impacted by these pollutants, but they're not the majority causing them. So there's someone else causing these pollutants to us, but we're over 60% impacted by it. Those are statistics. Black and African Americans, Latinx, Indigenous people, usually communities of color, the rural, all of those vulnerable populations are paying the heavy, heavy price. So we have to make sure that we consider and center those lives, those experiences, those stories when we're talking about a just and equitable transition. And with that, I'm actually going to transition it back to you, Jennifer.
Thanks, Ebony. And as Ebony mentioned, we're going to talk more about environmental racism and climate justice in tomorrow when we talk about ways to advocate, because there are too many policymakers who don't know what environmental justice and climate justice are. And they have not looked at the statistics and the maps and the health to see that this is a real issue. So your voices are going to be very important in that. So I just want to continue on the impacts. Our built systems, our infrastructure. The Doral apartments are in Charlotte. The picture on the right is Wilmington. And you can see the headline that you know, the roads were cut off from assistance from neighboring communities during the flooding of 2018. There were a lot of rescues that had to happen. And, you know, it's interesting, in Charlotte, and I'll talk about this in solutions, but we looked at the expense of rescuing people, of property damage, of lives and health costs, and lives lost. Very hard to put a number on that. But you actually save money when you figure out a way to keep people healthy and safe. And so we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a minute about our flood buyout program. But here's another picture of someone being rescued from a house. And as climate changes, increased rainfall is changing our floodplains. Density in our growing urban centers, not just Charlotte, but Wilmington, Greensboro, Raleigh, all of these places are increasing in density, which means more impervious surface, which means more flooding. The drainage isn't adequate. Our stormwater systems are not large enough. They have to be replaced. That costs a lot of money. We have to update building codes to move vulnerable systems out of the way of floods. And looking at evacuation routes, air rights, something that the legal folks in North Carolina didn't think about before we had solar panels. So if someone builds a building next to yours that's taller, it cuts out your sun, and then your solar panels are not going to work. So there are all kinds of issues. And then of course, our tree management, our transportation systems, everything from airports, our highways. There was some articles about the highway that goes through our Outer Banks and how it's cost over $400 million in the last 10 years to keep repairing that as it gets washed away. The highway in the picture is in New Bern. We also have to worry about our ports, our shipping lanes. We know about the supply chain right now and how the ports have been challenged by COVID. Well, they're also challenged by climate disasters. And as those roads are blocked and trucks and ships can't get through, that leads to food shortages. So transportation is a network important to us all. Utilities. Not only are the power lines swept down by extreme wind, hurricanes, and climate disasters, but then we have power outages. And we saw this in Texas when they had the polar vortex come down and actually freeze some of their infrastructure that wasn't built for climate that cold, because we know that the jet stream is changing. And so weather weirding is happening. So we also know that that states that are on the coast, if you look at the chart on the left, the darker colors have had many more power outages, up to 300 times the number of power outages that they had in the mid 2013 and 2015 that they're having now. And Louisiana is one of those, Connecticut, and even California. North Carolina is in that mix as well, not as impacted as Louisiana, but we are absolutely experiencing the same challenges with brownouts and outages. And again, our vulnerable populations, when the heat goes out in the winter, or electricity or the air conditioning goes out in the summer, the elderly and low income and children are extremely impacted. Our water systems, you don't think about when we have flooding, that floods our sewage systems and the sewage gets into the surface water. Not only that, but you think about auto repair shops, all the oil and the grease and the nasty chemicals, things in your garage that get flooded, all that gets into the water supply and the surface water, which goes into your soil, which goes into places where kids are playing. It's all very unhealthy. And towns having to repair those water systems are running out of money. They don't have the tax base in our smaller towns. They've had to get bailed out by the North Carolina, Emergency Water Fund. And you can see that they're, asking for more resilience measures that, again, they need state money to pay for because they don't have the local tax base. Our schools are impacted. After the pictures here from Hurricane Matthew, there were 7 schools flooded. You heard from Ebony, 139 were flooded in 2018. This one's 2016. Students left the county. They lost thousands of students They don't know if they went to neighboring counties, if they went to other states, and they lose money when that happens because the way our state funds education, it's the money is based on the number of children in the school system. And, you know, not to mention the disruption. Of course, we've had COVID that has compounded that. All of our insurance costs are rising too. These pictures are, you know, these are from the New York Times because they know that North Carolina is one of the most threatened, and it's the pictures are really stark. If you look on the right, that's, you know, those houses are basically gone, and they're not going to last much longer. We've lost an entire street in parts of the Outer Banks, and it's all about how are we going to pay for that? How do you reimburse those homeowners? How do they find a new life? How much do you repair the infrastructure before you have what's called managed retreat? And that's something that more communities are starting to talk about. Again, their policy decisions, their insurance decisions, and this is hard. It's hard on families. The last area of impacts that affect all of us are our natural systems. So many people care about the birds. You know, we have species going extinct. We're losing cropland. We're harming our drinking water. But even our parks, on the right is a picture of Whitewater Falls, which is a beautiful park out in Western North Carolina near Cashers. And that had a fire that ruined a big part of the walkway. And it took, you know, a couple of years to rebuild that. Even our coastline, if you look at that picture at the Outer Banks, that's erosion from storm surge. These are natural areas that mean a lot to people and that are part of their livelihood. There are people who are living there who depend on the natural systems holding up. So that natural heritage is important. And then, of course, when we have fires, we get mudslides. And that picture on the bottom is a picture of a mudslide, because when fires destroy the trees that are holding the banks together, and a heavy rainstorm can cause that mud to move. We had a major section of Highway 40 that was closed for a while because of a rock and mudslide, as we have those increased storms. So we need to take a big breath because one of the things we'll tell you is when you're talking to people about climate change, don't spend all your time on the terrible impacts, because it really does lead people to say, I just can't deal with this. I mean, this is part of the challenge. So what we tell folks, we told you a lot of impacts, and that isn't even all of them. We can give you some resources for more. But when you're talking to a group, just talk about a few impacts and then spend most of your time on what we're going to do next, and that's solutions and benefits. And I think since we're about halfway through, I'm going to give everybody a minute. Let's see, I'm going to stop the slide share so we can say hello to everybody. Hi. Hello. And we can take a few minutes to get a glass of water, stand up and stretch. Let's just take like 90 seconds. How about that? Yes, we're going to stretch. I'm going to stand up because it's hard to sit for an hour and a half. There we go. Woo. Take a deep breath. Get some water.
I got to say hey to Dennis Testerman out there, and Kayla O'Neill, and Jennifer Sellers, who walked away. Belinda Joyner, Felicia, lots of people, Madison. Lots of people on the
Felicia.
On the
Yep.
Yeah.
See some great folks. And if you all, one of the things that we're doing with our ambassadors is creating a network. So if you all, you know, you're welcome to put in the chat your name and your town where you are, and we'll connect everybody by email, everybody who signs up to be an ambassador, because it's about building our community of advocates. So we'll get everybody at the end, we'll everybody turn their cameras on. We'll take a nice picture. All right, let me get a sip of water.
I got a shout out to my board member, Jennifer, Allison, thank you for joining.
All right. And we got some folks from our local universities. I see someone from Winthrop. That's great.
Mhm,
Good to see everybody here.
mhm.
Okay, everybody got your water? We're ready to talk about the good stuff now? All right. We're going to get back to solutions. There we go. So we're going to briefly cover what's going on globally, but really we're going to talk mostly about North Carolina. So what's going on right now? Conference of the Parties. You want to know what that COP, you know, people throw around COP26. It's a conference of the parties that were the original signatories to a UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And the first meeting of the Conference of the Parties was in 1995, but it was 2015 when they signed what are called the Paris Accords. And that's when they started measuring greenhouse gas emissions country by country and pledging to reduce those. What we know is that, and right now, we know they're meeting in Glasgow. If you've been watching the news or listening to the reports, President Biden was there, unfortunately. President Xi and Prime Minister Putin were not there, but there are thousands of individuals, organizations, and official representatives who are trying to come together to agree on global solutions. Now, we also know the picture on the left is 2015 predictions. On the right is from a couple weeks ago in the New York Times. When we look at where, even if those parties to the agreement do what they're supposed to do, what they've pledged to do, look where we're going to end up. We're still going to end up with as much as 3 degrees Celsius of average temperature increase. That's almost 6 degrees Fahrenheit. That will be devastating. So even at the current pledges of all the countries, we're not going to get to where we can preserve the ecodiversity that we need, or the lifestyle in some of our coastal areas and our islands and other arid parts of the world. At least you look at with no climate policies, the predictions were very dire. That's narrowed a little bit as science gets more and more data and better information. But we still, on the right, if you look at where we are today, even what we've pledged is not going to prevent the worst. So we need to be more ambitious. We need to do even more. And before I turn to national solutions, I just want to say the other challenge that COP26 has right now is that, once again, those communities that are Black and brown communities, low-income countries, have not been able to come to the table because there's a housing issue, there's a travel restriction, there's so many things compounding. And what some of the folks from the Southern Hemisphere are saying is that the Northern Hemisphere countries, the developed countries, have created the pollution. They need to help us fight climate change as well. So again, climate justice is global, and in everything we do, we see the impact. So our federal government, after 4 years of denying climate change, is now back on track. The EPA has called carbon a pollutant since 2009. The current head of the EPA, Michael Regan, is the former secretary of our Department of Environmental Quality in North Carolina. So we're very excited by that. But again, it's up and down with our national policy. So in January 27th, President Biden came out with an executive order on how to tackle the climate crisis. And we know that the amounts that Congress, the amounts that they're haggling over right now included originally a great deal around climate change, support for the energy transition, tax incentives, much of the infrastructure needed, EV support, et cetera. that has been ratcheted back. We know the critical balance in the Senate right now, it's 50-50. One of our senators is from West Virginia, a coal producing state. He's been continuing to try to keep fossil fuels alive, looking more at self-interest and the state interest than looking at the global and national concerns. So again, it's politics as usual, a big challenge. We also know that the G20 just met, and there's a picture of Biden at that meeting, which was in Italy right before COP26. And again, some people were disappointed in the pledges that came out of that conference. We don't know, the climate spending in the infrastructure Build Back Better package has been reduced to $555 billion. That's still a lot, but we don't even know if that's going to pass. And so this is a picture, I think, from yesterday that the Democrats are still trying to figure out how to get this through. On the other hand, we're a lot better off than we were 2 years ago, and we're seeing some real policy discussion. And every year is a new opportunity to influence national policy and to make sure your legislators know that you care about it too. I'm going to turn it over to Ethan now, who's our energy expert, and he's going to talk about regional and state policy and a lot about North Carolina. Ethan.
Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Yeah, so as Jennifer said, I'll jump right in here. There is a lot going on at the regional level. A number, as you can see, there's a lot of different regional organizations from the Alliance of Regional Collaboratives for Climate Adaptation around Mississippi and the Mississippi greater drainage area, the Great Lakes areas. Specifically for North Carolina, these last two are great to call out. First, love to applaud Clean Air NC. Through June, we have June here. They put together a petition for the North Carolina Environmental Management Commission, which has been accepted to pursue joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative in North Carolina. This will now move towards the Department of Environmental Quality within the Department of Air Quality. They will be looking to do a notice and comment rulemaking for North Carolina to join. The Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative are a number of states on the Atlantic coast that have collectively joined a cap and trade market for carbon, where they cap the amount of pollution from certain industries that they're allowed to pollute, and then distribute credits that are then traded with a lowering cap over time, so that lowering pollution. It also has generated some pools of money that have been able to be applied to things like energy efficiency and some low-income energy poverty issues in certain states. These are things that are up in the air, all kind of moving forward. But through Clean Air NC's leadership, we are moving forward as a state in joining the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, RGGI for short. Also mentioning the Smart Power Partnership there at the bottom. Smart Power, it is North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland, and is a collective partnership around developing offshore wind off of all of our coasts from the Chesapeake through the Outer Banks. Next slide, please. And so now we are looking at some state solutions. Next slide. First up, our renewable portfolios by state. As you can see, North Carolina is actually the only southeastern state that has a renewable energy portfolio. Ours was passed back in 2007. It had a limit set at 12.5 by 2020 with solar at 2%. This has actually been very easily met, as we'll hit on some of our next slides. North Carolina is actually a leader in the solar industry. And through that and some of our hydropower dams, which also count, we fairly easily met our renewable energy goals, though those can be updated and should be updated to continually push this envelope into the future. Next slide, please. Yeah. So this shows some national solar trends as we're looking. Installation of wind and solar in 2020 was 61% higher than 2019 and nearly 50% above the record that you see there in 2016. So we're seeing a clear increase, a good trend on that while we're having prices go down. We're looking at, projecting double or on track to double capacity within 5 years, hopefully less than that. And there's a lot of jobs implications for a lot of these, thinking that doubling the share of US renewables has been shown to potentially add up to 500,000 more jobs in the industry. And solar can be resilient as well. It normally is installed in a way that can withstand different natural disasters, though of course they are natural disasters for a reason. So oftentimes they are more resilient, and in saying that, there can be some, the media line is not always right. For instance, out in Texas, a lot of the Texas issues of last winter actually had to do with natural gas pipelines freezing over because they didn't want to pay the extra that they do, say, in Minnesota to make sure that that doesn't happen. But the wind turbines and solar were, while impacted, nowhere nearly to the same scale as fossil fuels. Next slide, please. Here, this is a little bit of a dated slide, but not terribly. And I like the visualization of it, showing that California truly does dominate in total installations. But there are a lot of different ways to slice up what is installed, what does it count, is it capacity, is it on there? All of that is to say, though, North Carolina was second. We have slipped to fourth, actually, behind Texas and Florida, with Arizona projected to pass us very shortly as well. We were very much a leader in this installations in the early to mid 2010s. We have tapered off some, as we'll see in a slightly later slide. We are majority utility scale, but we still are very much a leader in this industry and a leader in the Southeast. Georgia and Florida, I think I've mentioned, are projected to pass us, though they have more capacity in general, so that shouldn't be too surprised. Next slide, please.
I'm gonna hold on one sec. I'm gonna stop share because I think somebody used annotate and they put green lines on the screen. So I'm gonna see if stopping and restarting the share takes those green lines off. So let's all keep our fingers crossed and see if this works. Yay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks. I was wondering if that was just my screen.
That's quite all right. Keep going.
Yeah. Oh, perfect. Well, hopefully that wasn't too distracting for people. Yeah, these are, a slide looking at national map of clean commitments throughout the United States. As we'll see on the next slide, we have North Carolina cities and counties are also leading the way. One big point that I want to ensure to make here is that net carbon commitments are a very big part of this, and they often include carbon offsets, which sometimes depend on technologies that don't exist, and sometimes lean into things like carbon capture, which really are not economical and potentially allow more fossil fuels to be burned for longer, which we really can't afford. One link that we did share was NRDC's Clean Commitments. That is a really great link that looks not just at cities and counties, it looks at corporations and the commitments that they have made, and a number of different levels with some really great graphics on through. This slide kind of speaks for itself. These are the cities and counties in North Carolina that have taken the lead on having 100% renewable energy or carbon-free pledges. Again, a lot of those are net carbon. So, keeping an eye on exactly where that is. But great cities in the lead. If you do not see your city on there, I highly encourage you to take the lead and start trying to move the needle in your own community. And these communities all have excellent resources that can be leaned upon and accelerate these efforts in your own community. No need to reinvent the wheel. For instance, I know here in Charlotte, we have a strategic energy action plan that was passed in order to implement our clean carbon or cleaner energy goals. And that could very easily be modified for other places. Next slide, please. So as I said, here's some more about North Carolina specifically in solar. I mentioned we slipped to fourth. Again, there's kind of different ways to measure. We're fifth in some other measurements. Almost over 840,000 homes are powered. We're getting close to 8% of our total renewable or total mix. Though again, if we're talking about displacing fossil fuels, we hope to have that a lot more. One of the numbers that I think really stands out is that we're approaching $10 billion in investment in the solar space alone. So this truly is a big economy driver for our state. This graph does a really good job of showing the boom of our utility scale solar and how we've tapered off some. It's not updated. I'll just say though 2020 is more like 2019 than it is 18 or 17. We have tapered off in that way, and you can really see where utility is dominating. With that said, we have had much more rooftop solar installed in recent years than we have in the past, and hopefully we want to see that trend growing. And then there's one final bit to mention. In our last round of utility scale competitive bidding that we had through Duke Energy, they had $990 million across 11 projects submitted. And it's projected to save Duke Energy customers $100 million over the next 20 years by being cheaper than what Duke would be buying otherwise. Next slide, please. So this is a great slide, just looking again at the national map of wind energy. You can really see there's Tornado Alley through the center part of our state, the Grain Belt, really leaning into wind and accomplishing a lot. Though one thing to mention is we hope to see a lot bigger numbers start popping off the Atlantic coast as offshore wind finally goes from being something we talk about to being actual projects being installed. Next slide, please. With that, in that vein, the Biden administration has taken a good number of steps to promote these things. From executive order trying to double the capacity, they have accelerated the implementation of the Vineyard Wind project off of the coast of, I think, Connecticut or Massachusetts. And so that will be the first offshore wind project, and is looking to start construction this year, hoping to come online by 2023. He has also opened up some more offshore lease areas off of the coast of, or off of the Atlantic, including one big one off of Wilmington. So that would be our second offshore wind lease. Our first lease is the Kitty Hawk Wind Farm. It's off of the coast of off of the Outer Banks by Kitty Hawk. It would be connected via Hampton Roads, Virginia, so the power would not be directly to North Carolina, but it's projected to have a $2 billion economic impact with powering enough power for 700,000 homes, with constructions planned to start in 2025. So a lot of stuff moving on wind, hopefully some onshore wind as well. Battery storage is obviously also something that's taking off. It is booming, with the fourth quarter of 2020 being an almost 200% increase over the third quarter of 2020, which was the previous record for all installations. So rapid projection, projecting to be 5 times the size of the market by 2025. So again, really projecting the boom. And in North Carolina, a couple of recent announcements to point out. Duke Energy actually, through other funding, not ratepayers, has 2 different pilot projects. One is a pump heat system by Malta, subsidiary of Alphabet. And then another is a flow battery technology from Honeywell. Both of these being tied into different formerly coal power plant sites, but trying to transition them to be renewable energy sites for the future. Going back to some of the just transition points that Evan A. mentioned earlier in our presentation. Next slide, please. Some of the state policy stuff, we have made some great strides here in North Carolina. Governor Cooper signed Executive Order 80, I guess it was 2018 now. Time has a way of flying. So it's 3 years ago now. And all of these different plans and directives have flowed from that. The key points of Executive Order 80 were by 2025, reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 40% in the state, having 80,000 registered electric vehicles, as well as reducing energy consumption in state-owned buildings by 40%. Again, all of those by 2025. So it has a climate change interagency council, which is all of the cabinet meetings that regularly meet and continue to. There's a clean energy plan calling out different key parts of our electricity system to rapidly decarbonize and what it would take to do that, with a headline goal of 70% greenhouse gas reductions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. We also have both a zero emission vehicle plan for private vehicle owners, as well as the government fleet. There's a transportation and workforce assessment plan trying to pull in community colleges to really help build that up, as well as looking at the weak spots where we will need more people to be working if we want to achieve our goals. There's also on there really a risk resiliency and assessment plan, looking at where we're weak at the coasts, at rainy day or sunny day flooding in Wilmington, to rain bomb flooding here in Charlotte, to mudslides up in the mountains. We have all sorts of different risks and resiliencies there. You see the greenhouse gas inventory at the bottom. That was actually shared on an earlier slide, and part of our slides earlier was done by our state. So a lot of different moving pieces to a lot of great policy. A lot of this then gets implemented at the Utility Commission level. The North Carolina Utility Commission is appointed by the governor. It's currently 6 Cooper appointees. The 7th should be voted on by the legislature soon and seated soon, so it should be a full suite of 7. It really does a lot of work on rate setting around electricity, natural gas, all the way to the ferries that take you to the Outer Banks. They do a lot of planning and fact finding as well, and then are very involved in the safety side of coal ash and pipelines, where it's the Department of Environmental Quality that does most of the permitting on that sort of stuff. There's a lot of different ways to be a good advocate. There's great links here. I know we're hopping through time, so I want to make sure to hit HB 951, which is a piece of legislation that was just passed last month. It was a compromise piece of legislation by both Democratic and Republican leaders in Raleigh, though I will say a lot of environmental organizations and particularly justice-oriented organizations were disappointed in the compromise, thinking that it may leave some communities unrepresented and more vulnerable. I say may because it kicks a lot of discretion to the Utility Commission, and there are a lot of outstanding questions yet to be answered. So in particular, there's a big piece of it called a carbon plan that would be moving forward that could really shape our policy. One of the great ways to get involved is through organizational interveners at the state. A lot of these, Clean Air NC does some of this. SCLC, the Southern Environmental Law Center, are the attorneys for a lot of organizations writ large that do this, from the North Carolina Justice Center, the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, Appalachian Voices, Vote Solar. All of these organizations tend to participate and hopefully will be, because it's a very consequential bill, big stakes in our state. But mentioning that, and almost all of its decision-making authority has been kicked to the Utility Commission at this point from this. So we'll see what comes of it. But I know that was a lot. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I'm gonna kick it back to Jennifer, I think, here.
And I want to remind folks, you're right, Ethan, that was awesome. And it's a lot. I'm going to remind folks that we will send you the slides. We will send you the links that you're seeing in the chat. So you don't have to write them all down or copy them or click on them yet. We'll send all this to you. But we just want you to have a sense of the scope of the resources that you'll have, because groups that Ethan just mentioned will be ones that if you want to advocate, you can get on their email list and find out how to add your voice, because the Utilities Commission listens to the public just like elected officials do. And it's up to us to put the pressure on. So I've got 15 minutes. We promised we'd let you out by 5:30. We're going to stay on and answer any questions. We'll stay on until 6, the trainers will, so you're welcome to stay, but if you need to leave at 5:30, feel free. I'm going to go a little fast. So I'm going to talk about local solutions because these are what you can see and be part of right here in your city, your town, right here in North Carolina. So just some examples of things that are going on. Clean Air NC has really focused on the West End Green District. Mecklenburg County is doing some flood buyouts. We've got urban heat mitigation, trees, solar, LED lighting going on, bike lanes are springing up. Local food has become a big issue, and community gardens, business is getting in, and we've got some solar things going on too. So the next 2 slides are June's about Clean Air NC.
Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, so this is a picture of Ron Ross, who lives in the historic West End in Charlotte. And we started our Air Keepers program in the historic West End about 4 years ago, I think. And because the historic West End in Charlotte is surrounded by interstates, it was a red line community and split neighborhoods apart, and then the highways came in, just like in Durham and many other places across the state. And so we've been measuring with some residents the levels of particle pollution through with portable monitors. So we came up, after the monitoring, we got together and put a report together. The report and residents went to the county commission and requested that a federal big monitor be placed in the community, and that has happened. But we didn't stop there. Just because we know the air quality may be worse there, what can we do about it? So next slide. They created the idea of a historic West End Green District. And so we want to try to mitigate the air pollution and make it a more climate resilient community. So these are some of the things on the list: strategic tree planting, because trees cool the air, clean the air, electric vehicle charging stations, green infrastructure. We want to get as much vegetation into that community to cover cement and walls and roofs and streets to reduce air pollution, again, cool community. And then we're going to be doing some other things like advocacy training and doing environmental justice tours, and then also providing healthy air education series for the residents so they know how to protect themselves from air pollution as well as extreme heat, extreme weather, that kind of thing. And I think there's one more. No, that was it. So for more information about the historic West End, just let me know if you're interested and I can share that. Let's put your name in the chat.
No, it's great that Clean Air NC is doing that, and other cities in our state are doing the same. Again, these are some examples. We've used natural adaptation in Mecklenburg County. If you can see on the right, that was the Doral apartments that were flooding frequently as our impervious surface increases and our rain intensity increases. And now you can see below, we've restored that to green space. It looks kind of gray there, but it's green. It's a greenway, and now it can absorb the intense rainfall, and people are not losing their property and their health, and their lives are not in danger. There's some examples from other cities that are working to mitigate urban heat. They're actually painting streets because reflective pavement is much cooler. They also have roof ordinances in places like LA and Denver, where if you're putting a new roof, you have to get approved materials that are reflective. Again, that reduces your heating and air conditioning costs because you're reflecting the heat. And they are requiring that trees are planted as well. And all of these are ways to mitigate the urban heat. I had to show this slide because if you look, this is a picture of a green roof in Chicago. Mayor Daley actually was really big on the green roofs, and that's City Hall. If you look at the heat map on the right, the heat picture, it's as much as 80 degrees cooler on the green roof because those black asphalt roofs are really hot. You know, if you try to walk barefoot on an asphalt street in the summer, and that's how much you can save energy costs and also reducing urban heat by using those green roofs. There was actually a mapping campaign that was done in Raleigh and Durham this summer. I haven't seen the results yet, but it had a lot of citizens. There were 150 people who took the temperature at a certain time on a certain day to help increase the data, to help increase cities' ability to strategically reduce urban heat. Tree ordinances, I think every major city in North Carolina has one. We recognize all the multiple benefits of trees. It's not just pretty, they also do a lot for health and for controlling flooding and air quality. They're also the right way. This is from the Arbor Day Foundation. There's a right way to plant a tree. They need to be maintained. So again, many of our low-income communities need assistance and resources to help maintain the trees when they do get them. That's important to remind your local officials about as well. Luckily here we have Trees Charlotte, and there's a Trees Durham and a Trees Raleigh, and all those groups are doing great stuff. Asheville has used solar panels to cover its transit center. Awesome. Really great idea. Provides shade to those buses and passengers waiting, and also generates electricity. They have 41 county buildings and public schools with solar on their roof. Terrific. Let's get more cities and towns to do what Asheville's doing. Raleigh was one of the first LED cities. As they said, it obviously reduces energy use. They're actually brighter as well, so it reduces or increases public safety. And they started putting these in 2007. They've seen the savings and they have benefited. Again, LED lighting is a really easy way to save. Reducing energy is one of the best ways to reduce that drain of the use of coal and gas that's still in our system. Transportation, we know that we're electrifying. We've got 18 electric buses ordered in Charlotte. I know Greensboro already has some. We've got electric bikes, and that's a picture of our city manager, Marcus Jones, giving electricity to an electric vehicle. And we've got a Wilmington bike path, and we've got cities around our state that are working on active transportation that's making it safer for bikes and pedestrians, because that reduces emissions and it also helps our health. The marketplace is changing. Electric trucks, pickup trucks are the most popular vehicles in the country. Did you know that? This is a new company called Rivian. We also know that Ford has a Lightning coming up. Of course, Tesla has the weird looking Cybertruck. All of these are changing the industry. And we need that to happen. We need the market to keep up. We need demand to go up. There are all these benefits that you know from clean transportation and active transportation. We're also bringing food, community gardens and full service grocery stores into our food deserts. We know that community gardens increase community cohesion. They're things you can work on together. They're visible. They bring people together. There was even an article in the New York Times that said, if you green up your neighborhood, you actually reduce gun violence. And they proved that with looking at data from several different areas, that because it was a focus, that there was a green area, the community came together and it reduced aggression and violence. Our corporations are stepping up. This is from Wells Fargo. They've got this whole sustainability goal. They've really thought about it carefully, looking at their own operations, but there are corporations around our state that are looking at this. Coca-Cola, Bank of America, SAS, Lucid Wealth, and investment companies are starting to market their ESG funds, which are environment and social and governance responsibly managed companies. If you have investments, ask your investment advisor for ESG funds. They've actually performed better in the marketplace. And the more you ask about it, the more people will start looking at changing their investments. Soul Smart is just a national program. The Department of Energy helps fund communities that are making it easier for people to do rooftop solar. So we have several North Carolina cities and some counties that have applied for that program and gotten some funding and financing through the Department of Energy. And so there's our happy, I don't know if any of you know Joel Olson, but he's a huge solar advocate. Finally, my last 5 minutes, some things that you can do personally, although the most important thing you can do is to advocate for policy change, but you can also do some stuff on your own. Here's your normal average balance of your own greenhouse gas emissions. Again, transportation and the heating, air conditioning for your house are the big parts, but food also plays a role. And, you know, the more you can bike and walk, the better. We talked about efficient and clean transportation. Global electric vehicle sales went up by 168% in the first 6 months of 2021. Now, I have to say, that's because they went down a little bit in 2020 because of COVID. But in the end, they predict by 2040, more than half of all vehicle sales worldwide will be electric. So time to look at that. And the orders for Amazon and delivery services, they're ordering electric vans. That is driving the market as well. So that's how we're helping in that energy transition and showing there's a need for those EV charging stations. The best you can do in terms of reducing emissions is conserve energy. Don't use the energy in the first place. So, you know, look at your weather stripping, look at your insulation, use ceiling fans, and use less water because water is pumped up to those storage tanks, and that takes electricity. You can even do a home energy audit. Food is part of it. We all know about not eating meat. Did you know that the average dairy cow drinks 30 to 50 gallons of water a day? So just think about the resource use in meat and dairy, but you don't have to totally eliminate it, just reduce it. And some of the companies are trying to show that they're being environmentally friendly and getting a Green Crown designation. So all of these are great things to do. As our diets change, we know that if we reduced our, if we got people to even reduce their beef consumption by half, it would make a huge difference. And, you know, the number of vegan and vegetarian restaurants is growing as well. So, wow, I have 1 minute left. So here's what you can do. We all know, you know, I don't see enough people taking reusable bags to the Harris Teeter or the Food Lion. Recycling, reducing your waste in the first place. Use that weather stripping, you know, make sure your house is energy efficient. And if you're going to buy a car, if you're in the, you know, in the next couple of years, look for an electric vehicle. You can also unplug all your electronics when you're not using them, because they draw on your electricity even when they're not working. Don't unplug your refrigerator though. So sorry for talking so fast. That's the end of day one. Here we are at 5:30. I'm gonna stop the share and we're gonna see each other and ask questions if we have any. Tomorrow, same time, 4 o'clock, same link. And we're gonna talk about communicating about climate change and advocating. So who does what? How do you write to the Utilities Commission? How do you compose an effective message? And then we have one more day, November the 15th, where we're going to have an orientation to talk about what resources you now have access to if you sign on to be an ambassador, because we've given you a lot of information in a short time. So that is the end of the slideshow. Thank you all for your attention and for staying with us. We'll see you tomorrow, or if you have a question right now, raise your hand and we will answer. Yeah. Okay, so I see Violette Blumenthal, and then Allison is next. Violette, what's your question? You can unmute and ask away. Or did I say that wrong? Violet.
I was just trying to wave goodbye.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Well, that was definitely a hand.
Okay.
Okay.
It was a clapping hand.
There you
Thank
go.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Did I see your hand up, Allison?
Yes, you did. That was not a wave. So I would love to do a home energy audit and check the air quality in the condo where we live in Midtown. Is it best to do that through a utility company, or are the private companies better that come in, or do you have suggestions for that?
Ethan, you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah, there's a number of different ways. You said you're in Raleigh, right?
No, I'm here in Charlotte.
No, Charlotte, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Well, regardless, Duke Energy territory. That was the first thing that went in my head. Yeah. So Duke does have a program, and it's generally it's free normally. So I will say but as with many services, you get what you pay for. Most of the private ones will charge you to come out. Unlike, say, solar, you can generally get a solar quote for free because they can just go on Google Maps and figure out what they need to figure out. Since they need to send a person to your home, generally these private ones would charge something. But there's a number of them out there for sure that do really good work and do a lot more comprehensive work than you will find from Duke, from what I understand.
Yeah. So do you have any, I mean, I looked it up one time and there's like a bunch. I didn't know if you recommend any top two or.
Yeah,
I
unfortunately.
would go with
not.
free. Right? Go
Start
with free.
free.
If Duke's going to do it for free, I'd go with free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they do, I didn't know if that was a balanced, like, I don't know, program, or if it was better to do it privately.
They want to reduce energy usage too, because they're seeing, capacity being reached. And so it's actually to their benefit to reduce energy usage.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, Duke has incentives within current laws to try to reduce it. They get paid money to help try to reduce energy efficiency programs and things like that. It's just, how comprehensive they are. I know, things like a blower door test where they seal off everything and they pump air. I don't think Duke does something to that level. But that is because it's that much more effort and time because you have to seal off the doors and then you pump it out and see where the air is coming out.
Yeah.
Where insulation. And so but that is, obviously one of the most effective things you could also do.
Right.
So there is a balance, I would say, as far as you're right, there are a lot of companies out there and I'm sensitive to that. Groups like NCSEA, the Sustainable Energy Association, Better Business Bureau, things like that could be a easy first check to, hopefully get to some of the better companies when it comes to this, because, there are a lot of companies out there.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Hey.
So I see Rachel has a hand up and I think Holly did as well. Holly, you might have had it up first. We'll go with Holly, then Rachel.
Okay, thanks. Ethan, I guess this would be a question for you, just to have a little more short fleshing out of what you said about Duke has two different pilot projects tied to renewable energy. I'm curious about that, specifics on that. And then the other one is organizational interveners. Sounded really intriguing. The SCLC North Carolina Justice Center, but maybe we only have time for one question, whatever.
No, that's easy enough. The first one was very specifically about energy storage, as the pilot projects. And
Okay.
so, I kind of mentioned it is a rapidly developing field. New technologies, costs coming down in existing ones like lithium ion, which is the kind of the main battery source that you see deployed nowadays, but all of these very kind of cutting edge energy storage options. And so I know I think the Department of Energy has kicked in funding for at least one, if not both of these pilot projects. I mentioned they're not being paid for by us paying our rates. This is Duke looking forward. So giving them some credit, trying to being cutting edge here. And they're running them in North Carolina. They have a 7-state footprint, so it could be anywhere that they were doing this. And so again, I'm not that familiar with the types of technologies that they're trying to install here. One's I think more of a pumped heat, where there's another flow sort of battery. I think they're both year-long pilot projects with an option for Duke to sign on and ramp them up to actually implement them within our system. So these are big questions. They would not be allowed to do anything like that without the Utility Commission signing off on all of those expenditures first. So these are proof of concepts that they, if they're successful, could then take not just to our utility commission, but anywhere, and run with those. So they're, interesting, kind of a lot of the actual technology, I will say, are, is above my head in there. That's where you hire the chemical engineers, you hire the people with the multiple PhDs, because that's, the true cutting edge on a lot of this stuff. I mean, sorry, remind me the second piece.
Yeah, I was just curious about, you mentioned the organizational interveners and this SCLC.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is
Southern
really
Environment-
important. That's
Yeah,
good.
absolutely. And that's where, as I said, this gets very technical in a hurry, and there's so many different pieces of what happens at the utility commission that a lot of times, even if you are interested, you'd only take on a piece, where some of these other organizations have a wider purview, let's just say. And so, there's different ones. The Southern Environmental Law Center, SELC, they have their biggest office is in Chapel Hill, but their headquarters is in Charlottesville, Virginia, I believe. But they really focus, per their name, through the southeastern United States, with offices in most of the big states. They're environmental attorneys, and they also focus on policy. So some are truly legal, doing a lot of the true suing developers, permits, a lot of that sort of stuff. As well as participating in a lot of the policy organizations, talking with legislators, putting out different reports, things like that. They're really plugged in on a lot of different issues, SELC is. As far as energy goes, the North Carolina Sustainable Energy Association, NCSEA, I've mentioned, they are very involved in almost all things energy in that space as well. And a lot of times people will participate in different ways. A lot of different environmental organizations, like I know Clean Air and Sea has hired SELC to do a lot of this work as their attorney, as their representative. And so, there's different ways to participate. Different organizations come at these things from different angles. I'll just mention, there's another really great organization called NC-WARN, the Waste Awareness Reduction Network, which it really pushes the envelope. The rhetoric tends to be pretty strong, but a lot of times we need that sort of thing. At the same time, NC-WARN isn't going to be the one negotiating a settlement with Duke Energy. That's going to be SELC and the other groups that, not to say they pull their punches, but their rhetoric isn't quite as inflammatory. I'll just say, not to say that it's not justified, just that you have different pieces within the greater landscape, and to each their own as far as where you might want to fit in there.
I'll jump in here. So one way that everyone here can get involved, like Ethan talked about, the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So we had that piece of legislation passed, House Bill 951, and that set carbon reduction goals, and all that stuff there's like 8 different what they call dockets, and that will be open for the different parts of that bill, where there'll be technical comments received, regular comments received. And for instance, one of them is coming up next week. And there are a lot of nonprofits that will be submitting comments. But sometimes we just will go, some of the groups will go with SELC, and they'll represent us at a particular public hearing or a docket before the Utilities Commission. So it's one of the questions I was going to ask you all was, are there areas that we discussed today that you want to learn more about? In January, when we did the training, people wanted to learn more about climate justice. And so Ebene and some others of us got together and did a 1-hour one just on climate justice. So if you really want to go deep into the NCUC, the Utilities Commission, to learn how rates are made, there was some multi-year rate making was in that House bill. which we've been fighting for years because we think Duke should be going every year to the Utilities Commission to justify why they want to raise the rates. And so that is something we're going to have to stay on top of, but I'll stop there.
Well, also how the public can have input, because there are public hearings, there are mechanisms for the public. You can either do it, through SCLC or Clean Air and Sea. You can support the organizations and do their sign on, or you can individually do it. And there are times that comes up. The last one with the integrated resource plan, we had over 200 people, because some of the folks who are ambassadors and some other folks, really got the message out. They had so many people sign up, they had to add 5 more hearings to get all the messages in. It made an impact. And that's, individual voices can make an impact too, but you have to know when the input is allowed and in what form. And so that's, get on an email, and we'll talk about this tomorrow with advocacy. Get on an email list, an action alert list from any of these groups that we've mentioned. Sierra Club has it as well. League of Conservation Voters. There are a lot of different organizations we'll talk about tomorrow. But that's a great way to have an impact. I want to recognize that Rachel's had her hand up for a while too. Oh, Holly, is that good?
No, that's good. Thank you. Thanks.
Awesome. Rachel, you still there?
I am. Hi,
Good.
can everyone hear me?
Hey,
Yep.
yep.
I'm wondering if maybe my question is better suited for tomorrow, as we're talking about advocacy more tomorrow, and that's okay, we can wait. But I am new to the field of advocacy. I've been on my town. I live in a small town. I've been the chair of the Tree Advisory Committee since 2019. And since then, I've worked with other volunteers to start a clean air group. And we've decided to focus on an idling reduction pledge just to get the ball rolling. We had like 15 volunteers this weekend come out to a big Halloween festival and help us get pledges. We're hoping to move to a point where we can approach the town government about creating low emission zones around town where we actually hang signage. Because I'm new to this, I don't know what resources are available. How do we get grants? Who can we talk to help us? Because I know people are already doing this, and there's no reason for me and my partner to feel isolated in this. The second question is kind of an opinion. We decided to focus on PM 2.5 because I don't think my community is terribly interested in climate change or air pollution in general. We wanted to focus on something that was really specific. It's very pinpointed to health. So we know that if we can stop people from idling, it helps with climate change. It helps with other things. But am I copping out by not throwing out that climate change piece because it just makes people's eyes glaze over? But when I say you're breathing in these invisible particulates that affect your health, people are like, really? So I don't know if I'm copping out. So maybe that's an opinion question, but also I would love, and maybe you can answer this tomorrow. I would love resources, people I can speak to, because when I do speak to people and they're interested, and I have so many ideas about how to move forward and be even more of a pain in the butt in my town than I already am. I'm already known as the pain in the butt. Uh-oh, Rachel's coming. She's going to talk about trees, or she's going to talk about clean air. So I have big ideas.
Connected.
Yes.
What town are you in? Just so we know.
I'm in Holly Springs, North Carolina, just south of Raleigh.
Awesome. So I just have to tell you, I'm gonna let June answer some of that too, but I have to tell you that when my kids were at a magnet school where a lot of people drove their kids because it's a magnet school and the bus ride was too long. I used to go down the carpool line with a little sign and say, please turn off your car. Our kids are breathing.
Yes, we're going there. That's exactly what people associate me with.
But absolutely, you don't have to say climate change. In fact, it's become a dog whistle for some people. So if you talk about people's health, if you talk about their pocketbook, like the expense, Reduce your energy cost by being more energy efficient. It's cost. Let's be cheaper, right? If you talk about all these things that everybody agrees on, you don't get the pushback a lot of times. And so we're going to talk about that in detail tomorrow, about phrases you can use, common values that everybody can relate to, and what really motivates people to act. And I'm going to let June talk about the other part about resources and other stuff. Or
yeah, absolutely, Rachel. We've had anti-idling campaigns. We have signs that we can provide to you. We have postcards to give to parents. A lot of what we've done over the years is work with school systems. So in the Charlotte region where we are, we've provided signs to all the schools that say, turn off your engines, kids breathe here. But we also have some signs for businesses that say, turn off your engines, make something about money. I don't know, for businesses. So we have lots of resources we can help you with. And then for the PM 2.5, is Holly Springs in Wake? Is it in Southern Wake? Yeah. Well, we can also talk to you about our citizen science program with air monitors.
That was something I'm interested in getting. There's 2 air monitors. When I look at Air IQ, I use that website a lot. There are 2 monitors in Holly Springs. I met a gentleman this week whose hobby it is to build monitors, sensors. So I'm hoping to reach out to him. But our argument really is, carpool lines and picking children up from soccer games. I have so many students who want to help. I'd love to put out monitors at 5 o'clock when parents are sitting in their cars for an hour while their kids play soccer, versus at noon when everyone's at work and the park is empty. I would love to be able to get specific. This is a park in our town, and this was the difference.
You would use, so what we're doing in our network is we put monitors that are stationary. But we have a lending library of monitors that are handheld, that are mobile. So you could borrow some of those. You could have the kids just walking along the carpool line, and then they could actually see. Kelly, I don't know if they can see it right then, but there's like Android device, and then there's the monitor. But they can actually do it in the morning. They can go inside and they can go online and look at, is it a green line? Is it an orange line? Is it a red line? Cool. So that would be, they're called air beams. Air beams are the mobile monitors, and purple airs are the stationary ones.
We're operating on a $0 budget. So,
well, just email me, Rachel. Just email me at June at cleanaireenc.org.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and check out our website too, and you can go to our citizen science page.
I troll you.
One final just plug for us. I know you get all of our resources. We have a bunch of other shared resources by signing up on the, to be an ambassador. There's a Google Drive full of these slides, full of other resources as well, that can be used for educational material.
Thank you.
Just a shout out to Kelly on our staff. Kelly actually did a No Idle campaign with some schools here in Charlotte many years ago. So, she even came up with a way to reorganize the carpool lines. Right, Kelly? I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah, that was quite a long time ago. But yeah, there is a way you can reduce idling by reworking the carpool line. There's some resources on the internet if you Google best practices for carpool lines. So this was several years ago, so there's probably more updated information out there now. But I'm happy to talk to you about that as well. My email address is similar to June's, but with my name, Kelly, in front.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Yeah.
We'll share all our emails for any follow-up for sure. And I just want to add to Kelly's comment that when you if you educate the kids at the school about recycling their paper from the class and about telling their parents not to idle the car, the kids will carry that message home.
Okay.
Because I know that my kids certainly did. I mean, I couldn't throw anything that was, glass or aluminum in anything but the recycling, container, because they would catch me. So, so that's a great opportunity. If there's a science teacher at the school, sometimes they can incorporate that into their science lessons.
That's actually my job. I own I own an environmental education business. I'm a contractor. I go into schools and I teach nature education.
Oh, great.
Yes.
We need to have you as a resource when other towns ask us.
Yeah, let me figure out how to work it out here and then sure.
I'm thinking you can write a blog.
I do actually.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
share that, because we'll send that around to all the ambassadors and they can, have
Okay.
that as one of their, because there are other small towns. This is the other thing we find, that people in small towns think, oh, I'm completely helpless because it's all a big thing and big policy decisions, but you can do a lot of great work, even, in local communities. And, the other thing is a lot of rural areas have opportunities to conserve, tree save and land conservation. And, there's some things that we need more rural areas to really understand and know about, and we need to collaborate. That's, some of that regional collaboration can be really great.
Yeah, and Jennifer and I actually spoke to who we call the mother of clean air for us, Nancy Bryan, and she moved to Stanley County.
Okay.
And she says, how do we, we want to go speak to the county commissioners. We need a climate action plan, but we don't want to say the words climate. So we worked with her, and when it was all said and done, she ended up saying climate, and she said she got the attention of them, and they referred it to one of the county government people to meet with her.
Okay.
And then there's a farm out there, a sustainable farm, and one of our climate ambassadors works at the farm, and so he's going to get with her, and this is Stanley County, very rural. He's going to work with her to push that forward. So
Cool.
you just never know.
Yeah. Thank you all.
And actually, some of those sustainable farms make great field trips for kids. For anybody who has a van and can do that, some of the after school programs, we should think about that. There's another one near Albemarle, near Norwood.
Well, that is, yes. So that's Juneberry Ridge.
Oh, that's Juneberry, same one.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's,
Yep.
yes,
And
Stanley.
they have school kids going through there all the time, and it's great.
Really nice.
I didn't realize that was the same one.
Other questions?
We got 5 more minutes. You guys are awesome to be hanging in here with us.
Yeah. Sherry and Raleigh, Raleigh's doing good stuff. You got a good sustainability program going over there, I know. Any kind of questions you've got, or anybody else?
See a couple of folks from Caldwell's Presbyterian's Creation Care team. Dennis and Alicia, hello. Dennis took the climate ambassador for the faith community. So he's seen this from a faith perspective.
As well as Holly.
Right, that's right. That's right. But there's different information.
Yes, there is.
Yep. To use, in your messaging.
Yep, there's Sherry.
Hey, Sherry.
Hi, I got here late because there's something going on. I was trying to get home and I couldn't get here.
Well, it's recorded. You'll be able to hear it.
Regarding, I got most of it. I missed the first 20 minutes. But I just wanted to say regarding the schools, I sat in on, I'm with Climate Reality. I'm the co-chair of the Raleigh chapter. And I sat in on a meeting with Green Schools. And that's a really good resource. And they'll do presentations for anybody. And that's through Climate Reality Project.
Oh, okay.
It's greenschoolsnow.org/present dash, oh no, request dash a presentation. And they'll get back to you within 48 hours.
Okay.
So
Is that
I
all over
think-
the all over the state?
They're all over the country.
Well, I know that. Yeah.
It's climate reality. Okay.
No, the
Right.
green schools, the presentation, they had a lot of people from California and a couple of other states too. But I'm requesting that they do a presentation for our chapter.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
One more, that made me think, one more idea or thought on resources for schools. We have a organization here in North Carolina called NC Green Power, which is actually funded. You can choose to add a little bit onto your electricity bill through Duke Energy, and it goes to this nonprofit, which is for education, but a lot of it is very school oriented. So I'm gonna go ahead and share the link as well. They have a solar in schools program where they put solar on a number of different schools across the state every year as part of it. And I know there's, of course, educational pieces of it. So I'm not that tied into it.
CMS schools.
I
Three
think-
CMS schools now have received that grant through NC Green Power.
I know that a number of years ago, North Carolina did a lot about putting solar up, and that included putting solar on schools. But that ended.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I'm very cynical about doing anything through Duke Energy.
Yeah. Well, we have a Charlotte Mecklenburg Climate Leaders here in Charlotte group that meets monthly that some of us are involved in. And one of the Sierra Club members really wants to push solar schools. And Duke Energy still has money for schools, nonprofits, congregations, specifically for those groups up through the end of next year to go solar, and they have rebate money up to $75,000 for schools or other nonprofits to go solar.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I know. That came from legislation. That came from people pushing policy work, so it's, we're trying to promote it. We can put more information. We'll make sure that's in the resource folder.
Yeah, great idea. You guys are giving us great ideas for us to add to our resource list. It's terrific.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's great about the sharing. And I know, Ebony, you were involved in one of those solar projects at Hidden Valley, right?
Yes, I was able to bring the NC Green Power grant to Hidden Valley Elementary, so they became the second school. Duke Energy actually funded the first school for Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, which was Olympic High. And then last year, McClintock Middle became the third. So we have
great. So we have three.
We have three now.
That's great. Thanks for doing that.
Thanks for that.
Well, we got about another minute.
And yeah, there's like those programs, there's a number of things. Duke is running them, but they were passed legislatively. So they are statutory requirements, and they're being told to do them. Like NC Green Power is a standalone nonprofit that Duke technically has no power over, but we use their billing system in order to help with their funding mechanism. And so but then there are programs, and then the rebates, those were funded by the state, but go through Duke Energy to actually get them paid. So you do have to go through Duke Energy on that one. So, and then there are other programs that are very much, I know Jennifer and I and Jim got a letter about, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but going green on your bill, which was strictly a Duke Energy program, which is not nearly the same. So it gets very confusing on what is, what, and sometimes some of these programs are a lot better run than others, I'll just say. And NC Green Power is one of the good ones. It just utilizes Duke, but not is Duke.
Yeah.
In that instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jennifer seems frozen. Oh, there she comes.
Oh, Did I go out?
Yeah, you just sort of froze, but it's all
Sorry about
good.
that. So yeah, the Duke program is called Renewable Advantage.
Oh, yeah.
Something, yeah. But yeah, the green power is better. Anyway, well, I'm glad that I didn't freeze in the middle of the presentation. That was terrific. Rachel, is your hand still up or is that just residual?
It's residual, sorry.
No
I don't know if
worries.
I'm supposed to, I'm not a Zoom expert. I teach mostly preschoolers, so, you know, we're not, lower hand, I see it now. Thank you.
There you go. You did a great job. Well, thank you all again. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 4. And this has been a great discussion.
Yeah, thanks for hanging on. Thanks, Allison.
Thanks, you
Good to
guys.
see you, Holly.
Thank
Thank
you.
you
It's
for joining.
excellent.
Hi,
Enjoyed it.
everybody.